everyone, my name is Paola García Vergara, and this is my video exam for the subject Resources in Education and ICT. Let's get into it. Okay, so my imaginary students are 5th graders, so that means they're 10, 11 years old. There are 25 students in the class, 11 boys and 14 girls. There are 2 gifted students, and the rest of the students are regular students. Also, most of my students are very good at presenting to an audience, and one important thing is that they are from Cartagena, and I will explain that in a few seconds. The activities they will carry out are for the social sciences class. The topic of the project will be history, specifically the ancient age and the Middle Ages, because I checked the Spanish curriculum, and these two are the 2 first periods of history they study during the 3rd cycle, and they study 4. But since they are from Cartagena, and it is a very, very rich city in terms of history and ruins from those periods of time, I wanted to take advantage of this fact. So, my students will study history by applying it to Cartagena's history and working with real Cartagena's history examples, events, museums, or monuments. And the educational objectives and contents align with the Region of Murcia core curriculum that my students must try to achieve through these projects are the following. Before explaining the phases of this project, I want to mention that I did create a prompt given the details from the students and the goals I wanted to achieve and everything, asking for proposals for the activities. And I used 3 different AIs. I even recorded it. I used DeepSeek, ChatGPT, and Copilot, but I didn't really like any of the answers they gave me. So I ended up designing almost everything by myself, and I did all the research for the project, for the execution of the activity. However, the answer I liked the most was DeepSeek's answer, and I did get some inspiration from its proposal. For example, the idea of how to implement Cartagena into what I wanted to do with history was DeepSeek's idea, and that's pretty much everything I took from AI. For the preparation of these assignments before each phase, I will explain them to the history of each age, but I will tell them that they must use the book and other types of resources such as multimedia, such as YouTube videos, articles, podcasts, to create their projects. This way, my students will also work on doing research. I don't want them to rely just on one source of information. The first phase of the project will be about the ancient age. I will divide my class into 7 groups of 3 to 4 people each, and I chose 7 topics, aspects, or phases to explain and describe the ancient age in the Iberian Peninsula. Each group will have a different topic. Their goal will be to represent their topic with a comic, but they will have to take into account that their short stories must be situated in Cartagena. So they must mention important events, places, or structures when relevant. They will work with Pixton, Canva, Pixton and Canva for this activity. Pixton for the comic creation and Canva for the creation of a required artistic cover of each topic. I designed these 7 aspects by doing some research on what primary students learn about the ancient age and the contents they study. And these will be the 7 aspects they will work with in chronological order. And when all the kids finish their projects, since most of them, as I mentioned before, they're good at presenting, to present all the topics to all the classmates, each group will present their comic. After seeing all these contents, after the presentations, to see if they have actually understood the history of the ancient age, the kids will do a Kahoot that I will prepare with questions related to the topic they have been working on. And that way, the kids will settle better the knowledge learned, and it will help me evaluate the task. For the second phase, I design, again, 7 topics or phases that perfectly picture and explain the medieval age in Spain. And they would have to do the same thing they did in the previous phase, in the previous task, but with stop motion. In this phase, they are free to do the stop motion however they want. Drawing with clay, with little toys, mixing drawing with clay, Play-Doh, I don't mind. This helps them develop their creativity and imagination as well. I will obviously teach them how to use the Stop Motion Studio app, where they will also learn how to do voiceovers. And I'll make an example for them, as you can see on screen right now. In 476, a Germanic chieftain dethroned the last Roman emperor of the West. This initiated the Middle Ages. The Visigoths were a Germanic people who settled in the Iberian Peninsula in the 6th century, founding a kingdom with its capital in Toledo. They adopted Latin as their language and applied the Roman laws and Catholicism as their religion. But in the year 711, a Muslim army from North Africa crossed the Strait of Gibraltar and defeated the Visigoths. Also, these are the topics that I designed for the Middle Ages. And, well, afterwards we will watch all the creations of all the groups in order, and they will receive some feedback from me to make them reflect about the task. And once again, as in the previous task, we will do a Kahoot, but this time with questions about the Middle Ages. Now I'm going to explain the added value of the digital tools that my students would use and their role for this project with the PICRAD framework we have studied in class. Starting with PIC, how students interact with the tools, this theoretical framework indicates that in any educational context, technology may have one of these three effects on a teacher's pedagogical practice: passive learning, interactive learning, and creative learning. My desired goal when designing these activities was creative learning, although I did implement some active, interactive learning too. I wanted my students to be active creators instead of just passive content consumers. Regarding RAT, I wanted to totally transform how this type of content is typically taught in schools. Because when we think of arts and crafts or projects in which students have to be the ones that create things, we usually think about natural sciences contents such as nature, space, plants, or civic values. But we don't see this type of approaches in social sciences classes. History is normally taught with master classes, books, and maybe some images, but we never do this type of activities for this subject, so I wanted to change that. So, starting with the comic, I think it is a very good option for doing this because history is basically like telling a story. It is a story. With this activity, my students will represent Spanish history with an appealing and visual storytelling project. And it is meaningful since they're seeing Spanish history from the perspective of their own city, Cartagena. Working with places like the Roman theater or events like the Romans versus Carthaginians battle is good for them because they're going to be like, oh, I have visited this place. I actually know about this battle. This is so interesting to me because it is connected to me in some way. And that's the thing. Connecting the content with the kids' real life experiences is the key for them to actually engage with the lessons, or at least that's how I see it. Besides, they will always be doing something, designing the story, working with Pixel, which can also help them develop their digital skills, brainstorming, interacting with their peers. So this method this method replaces traditional lessons with this dynamic and creative storytelling. On the other hand, the goal of the stop motion task is very, very similar to the comic, since it can also be a way to tell a story visually. So it is a very interactive and creative activity that can make difficult or boring concepts or contents much easier to understand and more entertaining to study. And the stop motion can also help them improve their patience and develop their artistic and creative skills. Finally, working with Kahoots at the end of each activity is going to help me evaluate if they have understood anything at all. It is going to be useful because it is going to tell me if they have learned something. And it is going to help them settle that knowledge in their minds, and it is going to make them pay attention to their classmates' presentations since they will know that they will have to do an activity that is about that. For the assessment of the task, I created a rubric taking into account the core goals of the Spanish curriculum that I wanted my students to achieve. And for this I used 2 AIs, but I ended up mixing their proposals and modifying what I felt I had to change, adding and eliminating some criteria. I used almost the same rubrics for both activities because the objectives and the main goals are almost the same, just the content changes from ancient age to medieval age. The criteria of the rubrics would be, let me check. Okay, historical understanding, which is about the content of their projects, if it is correct or not. Cause, consequence, and chronology, if the events they describe are well ordered and clear. Social and cultural aspects, use of the digital comic format or / stop motion format. Originality, not only if the story is original, but also the how they deliver the information. Respectful representation and oral presentation skills. Those would be the criteria. And as you can see, this rubric is a rubric that focuses more on the objectives of the curriculum. And the grading system would be excellent, 5 points, good, 4 points, satisfactory, 3 points, and needs improvement, 1 or 2 points. Now for the assessment of the tools, Pixton, Canva, the Stop Motion Studio app, and Kahoot. I will analyze them based on their privacy, data protection, and right policies following the rubric for e-learning tool evaluation. For this, I use the Common Sense Privacy Program, and these are the results. Pixton passes with a 76% score, Canva doesn't pass with a 75%. Kahoot actually surprised me because I found out that it is a Common Sense Privacy verified tool, so apparently it is totally safe to use, which is great. And finally, I couldn't find the Stop Motion Studio app in the Common Sense Privacy Program, but I read the privacy terms of the app, and although it says that it does not collect or share data of any kind, it doesn't require account creation, and it doesn't have access to personal information, I do consider that it lacks detail. But anyways, for the classification of the tools, following the rubric, I put it in works well all the criteria for Canva and Kahoot. For Pixton, for the first and third criteria, I put it in the minor concerns because it does require students to log in, and there are limited export options for students' work. And for Stop Motion Studio, for the first criteria, I put it in the minor concerns column since it doesn't need account creation, but there is no clear policy, as I mentioned before. And for the second criteria, I put it in the serious concerns because there is unclear ownership and undetailed privacy statements. And for the third one, I put it in works well. Now it's time to talk about the ACAD framework. ACAD stands for Activity-Centered Analysis and Design, and according to the University of Murcia, it is a tool that improves the understanding and design of learning using as a base the knowledge and the elements that situate the learning activity. It addresses 4 aspects that we need to take into account when designing an activity. And well, for the pedagogical theories, my activities follow Piaget's and Brunon's constructivism because my students learn by actively building knowledge. And I also followed situated learning from Leib and Wenger because this theory says that learning is contextual and active and that we should mix education with reality. For the design of knowledge tasks, I used masterclass for my students to have previous knowledge of the contents of the project. Oral exams, visual analysis, storytelling, of course, exhibition and group feedback, and collaborative work with class notes. For the social interaction design, I used facilitator, audience, group, teacher, team, and community member. And lastly, for spaces and resources, we would use classroom, laptops for the comic, tablets for the stop motion, paper and pencil, pen, and that's it. For the second part of the exam, I'm going to answer questions 2, 3, and 5. For the theoretical concepts, I chose PICRAT and PLE. Starting off with PICRAT, how can this be useful for me? Well, not only it makes you think about how you, the teacher, transform some practices, but it also makes you think about the student's relationship to this technology. So imagine you're a teacher and you have done a few new activities with technology and you want to analyze how you have integrated that technology into your classroom or the effects it had on your students. Well, following this framework, you must ask yourself, does this activity replace, amplify, or completely transform the traditional approach? And are the students just receiving information? Are they interacting with the contents? Or are they actively creating or building something? So I think it is a good framework for teachers to classify their approaches using technology. Now, how can PLEs be useful? According to this book, PLEs are a way of understanding how people learn using technology. It is the set of tools, information sources, and activities that each person uses in order to manage their own learning and achieve learning goals. So how can this be applied? How can it be useful? Well, PLEs can be applied not only to your students, but also to teachers. For teacher training, since PLEs are useful for them to reflect on their digital competence and their skills when using technology, which leads to their professional development, which is what we are always looking for as teachers in a society that is constantly progressing in technology. For the technological concepts, I chose social media and AI. When talking about social media, we're talking about YouTube videos, Instagram Reels, TikToks. All of these formats can be useful in a classroom for our students to share their findings of their projects, to inform people, but also to receive feedback as it is public and everyone can see it. And finally, AI. A specific case where AI can be useful in the educational field is, for example, when students write something for a task and they want the text to be perfect or they want to correct mistakes. In this case, there are AI writing assistants like Grammarly that can help you to enhance your writing. For the third question, since I chose PLE for the previous question, I thought that it would be a good idea if I actually applied what I explained. So I decided to design my own PLE. PLEs address three types of tools. Reading tools, which are the tools, sites or sources of information we extract information from. Reflective tools, which refer to the tools we use to work with information with, and social tools, the tools we use to share and recreate this information with others. Let's see my PLE. As you can see here, for doing, I included Canva and Genially. They're ideal for creating all sorts of visual formats to present information. For example, I literally used Canva to create this diagram. They're very useful tools that I will for sure be using in the future. I use them constantly, and I think I will also be using them to present contents to my future students in a very visual and eye-catching way. I also put here DeepL, which is a tool I use a lot to make sure I translate everything correctly. I use it for everything, not just college. For discussing, I included Discord, a very useful tool to communicate and share information with my classmates when doing group projects or with my friends. And for reading, I put Notebook LM, a great AI that I love using to extract information from articles. For example, the other day I wanted to know about just the causes of the Flynn effect, and I found a very long article that talked about lots of things related to this topic. What I did was to send the article to this AI, and it found exactly where it talked about the causes, and it made my work so much more efficient. So I think I will also be using this tool in the future as well. And for the last question, regarding the grade I think I earned in this course, I think I maybe deserve an 8 or a 7. I always say the same thing whenever teachers ask me this question. I always say that I don't deserve a 10 because I am aware that I am horrible at time management and organizing myself. This means that most of the time I end up doing things last minute. I am a procrastinator, I know that, and this has consequences, and I am aware. However, I always end up doing things with finishing things on time. I finish everything on time, and I don't usually rush things. I take my time, and I try to do it as best as I can, even if that means sleeping questionable amounts of hours. Anyways, the thing is that I put a lot of effort in this subject, and I really did, and I feel like I have also improved a lot. I think we all have improved throughout the course, and I think it is visible. You can actually see it with every task and every post, every blog post. And besides, inside my group, I tried to help others as much as I could. I was always there if there was any difficulty that could compromise the execution of the task. Even if I already finished my work, I tried to help as much as I could. I tried to be active. I tried to be an active member inside the group. I tried to ask and be interested in how the task was going every day for the members, for the other members of the group. And also with the tasks, I always try to see the potential. I always try to see in each one of them how it could be beneficial for me in the future as a teacher, or in the future next year as a college student. So I always try to reflect after each task instead of just doing it. I wanted it to be meaningful. For me, the one role I didn't like at all was the analyst role. I of course understand that it is essential. I understand why it is important, but I didn't like it for various reasons. First, although I consider myself to be a very objective person and I could grade my classmates in a fair way, that doesn't mean that I like it. I don't like evaluating other people's work if they're in my same position. Like the fact that we are all students, and it makes me feel that I'm not authorized to carry out that task. So that was a challenge for me. And also, on the other hand, it wasn't easy for me because it requires using AI in a way that I'm not used to. And I'm not the biggest fan of AI. Don't get me wrong, I'm not a hater of AI. I just, I use it every now and then. I actually use it, yeah, a lot. But not like that. I don't know. And also, I didn't understand very well the purpose of that part of the role's task. So whenever I don't understand why I'm doing something, it makes it difficult for me to carry it out. Honestly, as I mentioned before, I used AI primarily to help me with the assessment of the project, although I did get some inspiration from DeepSeek at the beginning. But for the for the assessment rubric, the one I got more inspiration from was ChatGPT. And then when I had my own rubric, I just asked this AI, ChatGPT, to make a rubric, like a table, with the text I gave to it. And that is a rubric you have seen on screen before. On the other hand, I did the entire design of the activities, and all the research for the contents I included in each phase was also done by me. And this is the end of my final exam. I really hoped you liked it because I did put a lot of effort in this. And that's it. Bye.